Quite a few years ago, I was in a meeting of church pastors and leaders. The leader of the meeting asked for a secret poll to show how certain we were saved, from 1 to 10. We wrote our number on a piece of paper. Out of about 100 people, most of which were pastors, the most frequent number was a 6, which is what I wrote. 4 wrote 10, and 4 wrote 9. Most wrote 5, 6 or 7. This tells you most people's assurance of their salvation is not very high. And, over the past 20 years, I've asked people this question about salvation. Results have been much the same. Today I would write a 10. Maybe even a 10 plus. Salvation, or being born again, is the most important aspect of the gospel. After all, we can't get to heaven without being saved, can we? No, we can't. We must be saved to go to heaven. The Bible is clear: we must be born again, which means being saved by trusting in the finished work of Jesus on the cross of Calvary. Most people have doubts about their salvation. The thought is, what else must I do to be sure that I'm saved, and will have eternal life with God? This was the question the rich young ruler asked Jesus, what must I do to be saved? Because the man was living by the law, his focus was on what he did. Jesus gave him an answer based on the law, and listed a few commandments. But in gospel reality, it is not keeping certain commandments that gets us saved, and born again, and into eternal life with God in heaven. The gospel is clear: it is by God's grace that we are saved, through our faith, and even our faith is one of God's gifts to us. Salvation is not by our works, or by what we do, so none of us can claim any credit for it. Paul goes so far as to say that God chose us in himself before the foundation of the world. Now, that's a pretty long time ago, isn't it? He says the same thing in another place, by saying salvation is not because of our works, but according to God's grace, before the world began. So, salvation is a gift from God. Our salvation is not dependent upon us doing anything at all. It's dependent on us believing God, and trusting Him enough to simply live life in the reality He declares to be true. This is what the gospel does for us: it declares the reality of God that we are simply meant to believe and live. The gospel is meant to straighten out our thinking, and transform our thoughts. This is what this coaching session number 2, which is on salvation, will do for you if you will simply have ears to hear gospel truth, and believe what it says.